Okay, introductions. I am Mikey Newman, the creative director at Gearbox Software. This is Aaron Tebow, the VP of development. Woo! And I'm dead. And and Brian Martell over here was the art director on Borderlands, and he's actually the vice president of the entire company. Just a quick show of hands, real quick. Who in this room has played Borderlands? All right. Show of hands on who has not. Give your seat to someone else. I'm just kidding. We're gonna jump right into this real quick with Brian.
Discipline? I'm curious about disciplines. How many? Well, let's do the student one first. How many students do we have here? Excellent. Don't use anything that you learn here to your benefit in the future. It's terrible. How many producers do we have? Okay.
Get out.
I'm very sorry. You're going to be throwing things at us before very long. Artists? Excellent.
Oh, nice.
We love you.
This is going to be right up your alley. Oh, one more quick thing. Sorry. I just want to Randy Pitchford is here in spirit with us today. He actually had to jet off to somewhere awesome and do awesome business, so me and Aaron
He's actually very sad. He wanted to be here.
He was actually at Luby's.
He would have done magic tricks for you. We apologize. And designers, very cool. I think you'll be excited about the changes that we're willing to make collaboratively with you. And level designers. Oh, wow. Okay, a few. Now I know there's some nomenclature things. Would anybody in here consider themselves an environment artist? Awesome. Okay, that helps with semantics. Well, I think that. Did I leave anybody out? Biz dev? No? Programmer? Oh, programmers.
Programming?
Can't do it without programmers. Okay. Animators? Well, art, isn't that all? Animation? Animators? Yeah. Okay, excellent. A few. All right, excellent. That is very, very helpful. Thank you. Well, I think that we're ready to get started. Brian, let's hear a little bit about yourself, shall we?
I am the Chief Creative Officer of Gearbox Software, and I was the art director for Borderlands.
They can't hear you. Oh, can we?
Yeah, they can hear him?
Yeah. All right, good.
Can you hear all right?
Sort of.
Okay. I'm also the co-founder of Gearbox Software, and, well, let's just get right into it. So, yeah, we decided to change the art style, as you know, pretty late in the production cycle. And we'll go through a little bit and kind of give you the timeline of where we did that, and by the 11th hour, we mean pretty late. So, you might not want to try what you see here today. This is my background. And these are the games that we've worked on. At Gearbox, we like to have our games that we make ourselves, our own IPs. We also like to work in other people's properties. As you know, when we started working in the Half-Life franchise. That's how we started Gearbox Software, was working on Opposing Force. We started 11 years ago and basically have built up all these games. One of our mantras is creativity, happiness, and money. We use this to decide on the kinds of games and the kind of products that we want to and play in, the kind of games that we want to make. So the high concept of Borderlands was pretty simple. At its highest level, it was Halo meets Diablo. Very simple. So we wanted to take the sort of action shooter, things that are in Halo and meet them with the sort of loot mechanic of Diablo. And so we'll begin the timeline here. Aaron, do you want to?
Yeah, let me speak to this a bit. So Borderlands was really done, with the high concept as a back of the napkin type of deal. We found ourselves a great partner with 2K. They have a fantastic staff, and they understood that in order to really accomplish something that had been attempted before, but in order to really pull it off, it was going to take the right gestation period. And so the concept phase, you're really talking about just a very, very small number of people who are trying to figure out what the best of both worlds from the RPG and the shooter genres would be. How would you pull these together? And they did a number of small prototypes and things in concept. The prototype phase grew up to about 12 people, and they began building their core tech. You had a team who had just come off of Halo for PC, looking at the data-driven systems there, and wanting to take those and apply them with an Unreal-based game, which we had some familiarity with, in order to pull something off, but they still weren't quite sure what that was. we grew the team up to about 35, 40 people in the core team, along with our central group, to pull off this Leipzig demo that some of you may have seen. There was certainly video of that out there, and coincided with a Game Informer article. And we really hit the ground, staffing up the team to a full production size during the second development period, which ended at the end of 2008. At that time, there were a lot of questions that we were asking. Did we have the game we wanted to ship, or did we want to try to do better? And then we made some decisions, and we went all in, full commitment on our final push to land it for September, October of 2009. And we really focused on having the highest quality that we could. We focused and we put everyone on it that we could in order to land this game. We're very proud of it, and this gives you, I think, a high-level view of production there.
One thing you will notice on this slide, especially at the bottom there, is that even though we did all these things before, we kind of made our game in about a year, like the whole thing, which was pretty fascinating, I think, for us, because it put a lot of pressure on us, because we knew we wanted to ship Borderlands when it shipped.
Yeah.
And
fortunately, we had a very solid code base. We had all of the core features already implemented, but it wasn't until fairly late that we finally understood what the game needed to be what it is now.
So one of the things that I'd like to take you guys through is the sort of history of the Borderlands art direction. So we'll go through the whole cycle of where we went. At the very beginning, we created these style sheets, which I'll show you in a minute. And these style sheets were a way for us to kind of ideally build consensus within the group or within the teams, so that everybody would know. I mean, we started out with Halo meets Diablo. What exactly does that mean? So now we needed to ground it in something. So we wanted to start to create what the world was going to be. And for some of the artists and some of the art directors, it was a bit, fighting against what they sort of felt like they should be doing. You're kind of questioning their abilities, if you will, to determine what exactly the look and feel is. So there was a little bit of questions on how was this actually going to work. So there we go. So this is the first board, and what we did at Gearbox was to bring everybody in the company and basically do a focus test and ask them what their opinions were about it, which one they thought was more applicable to the game, and this was the first one. What's interesting about this one to me is, and this is being done back in 2005, but if you look to all of the next-gen titles, the sort of desaturated look sort of came out of, proved out to be very similar to this particular slide. So this was our next sort of style sheet. In this case, we wanted to look at something that was sort of a retro styling, 1940s influenced technology. We were looking at things like Machining Krieger, for example, of that. And we wanted to see whether we could kind of meld these things together to create something that, again, feels like Halo meets Diablo, but in this sort of strange world. This one, in hindsight, really reflects back on where we ended up. If you look at those key words and you think about Borderlands, I think this is pretty accurate to the feel that we get from both the art direction, the gameplay, all of those kind of things. And you can kind of see a little bit of the look kind of peeking through there. In this particular case, I think this is a bit like where, when you look at something like Gears of War, this is one of the kind of places that we could have gone. This is before we were really seeing Gears of War, but that kind of has that sort of like heavy, super soldier sort of feel. Still haven't seen a game that's really in this sort of look and feel, so if any of you want to kind of make something that has that sort of high-tech anime, Ghost in the Shell look, please do. And we didn't really expect that we would ever actually do this, but we wanted to kind of go through the whole gamut of what sci-fi would look like. Because we knew we wanted it to be a sci-fi game. We knew we wanted it to be out in some fringes of the universe. And what's kind of funny about that creature on the right is we'll probably want to, use him for Borderlands 2. He's the testicle monster. We've got all the vagina monsters in the game, so. This one I think is kind of interesting because when you look at Mass Effect, this is well before we saw Mass Effect, I think we can kind of see where they ended up. And it's an interesting approach, and you kind of look at all the different samples of things that we were looking at. You can even see one of their aliens looks pretty similar to that, and that was from, I think, CG Society, somebody did that. This is what we like to call high sci-fi. When people think about high fantasy, they're thinking about Dungeons and Dragons, and they're thinking about the World of Warcraft type of stuff. I think this is kind of speaking to that from a design standpoint. And then we didn't really expect that we would end up here, although I think you can see some elements of our extreme characters that kind of came through. Later when I show you where we were sort of going back and looking at where we were, I definitely went back and looked at these images. I'm looking at the concept art and all those kind of things. So all of this is having an impact on what our original ideas were for where Borderlands should go. This is what we ended up picking. And I'll show you some examples in a bit, and you'll start to see that the sort of characters have a little bit of this. You look at the runner that's in the game, and you can see that it has a little bit of that retro styling. Some of the buildings and things like that you see in Firestone, they're all sort of generated from this original idea. So, did the process work? Well, kind of. It did. The bad thing was it demoralized our original art director. He decided that, not because of this, but he was becoming disgruntled and ended up going to a different field, but this didn't really help that matter. But for the rest of the team, I think it felt okay. They all could get their head around what this looks like. Even though I think that when you look at that style sheet and we started to call it retro sci-fi, I'll have Aaron talk about this for just a minute.
Yeah. So, based on this focus testing approach to understanding where we should go with the game, there were pros and cons to that. Pros were it was great for consensus building around the company and getting everybody behind the idea of what we were going to do with this game, where we started out with this very, very high concept and trying to turn that into something that we would execute. Having something that was tangible like this was great, having people look at it and to build that consensus. Obviously, on the con side, it didn't work out so well for the person who started out as being the art director on the project. But we got some great insight into how to do focus testing in the company, which we hadn't really done before. Sometimes we had worked with publishers who took that on later in development, but the concept that you could do focus testing at all times in a project and that you could use that to come up with very good solutions to complex problems was a new idea. And so this was the very early seed for what later became our Truth team. Our Truth team is led by a very talented staff with psychology backgrounds. We've modeled things based on a number of different usability teams around the industry. You can imagine who some of them are, but there's some great things to them to steal from and to build on top of.
And it had an impact on where the game went.
Had a great impact, and we used them quite heavily throughout development later.
Also, something in the Truth team that was interesting was we used basically how they would rate the game at that point, and that helped us understand when we were going in the right direction. So if the game started out at a 70, after we talked to these guys, then they would, basically by the time we shipped, it was at, pretty close to what we actually expected. So it was kind of interesting. But the retro styling, the retro sci-fi really wasn't still specific enough for all the team to get involved. I mean, what does it even mean, right? So where was the game up to this point? We had gone through, as Aaron was talking about, these sort of early green light sessions and those kind of things.
We call this our brown period.
This is our brown period. See? Yeah. So what I want to show you in these, though, is what you can start to see the roots of where we ended up, right? You can start to see that, we've got Roland, we've got Mordecai, we've got even our bandits here. We've got our sort of extreme effects, that later come into the game. Crazy emissive effects on all our weapons. This guy stayed through the whole history. This is our crazy psycho bandit, right?
With his pizza cutter? I never quite understood what that was. But
his extreme pizza cutter of death.
Does he work at Domino's and he's just really angry?
But we ended up really just needing to ink this guy later, but he's, on the cover of our box. Then we also use something that we call a kit bashed aesthetic. I mean, if you played the game, then you can see where we're using assets over and over again. And we kind of put that into the fiction. You've got these bandits, and they're doing this stuff. But we use this technique, and you get it from sort of the Star Wars, kit bash technique of putting model pieces all over the outside of these ships and things like that. And this, I don't really know what was wrong with that barrel, but curved barrel with a saddle on top. But here, you can again see, this is our super loot chest of awesome. It made it all the way through the game. And again, everything was still very brown. So now we had to ask ourselves, what are we going to do? If we're going to be going this direction, then we have the problem of the economy of production, right? How are we going to make all of this look really good? How will it be received looking like it was looking? Would it be just considered a poor man's Rage, where, Rage is, these guys have great assets, they're looking really beautiful, they're in a post-apocalyptic world, Fallout's in a post-apocalyptic world, that's kind of us, but we're, up in a sci-fi area, out in space somewhere. But at the same time, they're all kind of feeling very similar. So as an independent studio, we don't have the option of just throwing tons of people on there, but we can be very dynamic. And we don't have massive amounts of capital to kind of throw at the problem. So we have to get a little bit creative. Aaron, you want to talk about production?
Sure. Everybody knows a triangle, right? So this is the Borderlands art style triangle. So we were evaluating where we were at the time in our brown phase, and thinking about what were the options we might have in finding solutions. Where can we look to take what we had and make it better? We weren't quite satisfied. Perhaps if we had more time. Then we could continue down the path that we were on and continue to iterate and polish what we had. Perhaps if we had more money, we could scale very, very broad, work with a lot of other people to buy us what the time that we didn't have, that we didn't think that we would have. Or perhaps if time and money weren't very flexible, perhaps we could do something else and refocus something with quality. But we weren't quite sure what that might be. But certainly these are the things that we were thinking about, what path we might go down. Well, it turns out that time was a kind of difficult one. There were certain launch windows that we really wanted to hit. And money was also a fairly difficult one. We weren't going to scale up the budget a whole lot, if anything. There was something that was set, already with the publisher. As an independent studio, there's only so much we can do there. Quality was an interesting one, though, because we care a lot about quality, and it's something that we feel that we have some more control over if we can find the right answers. So seeing that we didn't think those other paths would go far, we thought perhaps we should look again at what we were doing in terms of quality for the game.
And just to jump in on one of the problems here, because it's very much part of the brown period, as we called it, that extended far outside of art. What's funny is, as a developer, your dream project is one where you set your own rules and you do whatever the hell you want to, and that's awesome. And the thing is, when you start creating your own world, you start creating your own rules and bringing yourself into these little boxes. So design side, even on the other side from the art, we had the skill trees in there, but a lot of the stuff in them was boring. Because our rules were so restrictive. Like, you look at the skill trees now and they're pretty crazy, but there's only so many ways you can increase the rate of fire and let you take a little bit more damage. But the brown effect was actually all over the project, and as Brian's going to point out, we needed to break our shackles and make a fucking awesome game and not worry about how real it is in this reality that we've created for us. Like, we created our own prison, essentially. So we're kind of breaking out here.
So the game was in trouble, but we weren't going to shoot it in the head.
Color!
This was sort of, when we're talking about the brown phase, this is a bit how I think it felt internally on the team. You can see that if you look at him, he's grabbing her knife, and she's grabbing his gun there. So, not a great time. So, frankly, the game actually felt really good. I mean, we were having a lot of fun, like Mikey was saying. The systems were solid. The action was over the top, and this, in fact, was one of the problems. And we had this little bit of art quality inconsistency. And there was an incongruence in this idea of this over-the-top action. So, for example, one of the things about this is the jump height. At the time, we were able to jump like 12 feet in the air, but you've got these very realistic characters doing that. That was kind of what I mean by some of the incongruence there. So, art direction wasn't entirely the problem. As I'm going back and I'm looking through the concept art, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a moment, the world is actually really neat. The direction is good. The execution maybe not so much. One of the reasons I think that was a problem for us at that time, and this is with our second art director, we were finding that we had some other solutions on other projects. And basically this art director job was becoming the sort of job of 5 people, right? It's actually more than that, but in a way we needed to shore it up. So we decided that we would bring some of our other talented people into the project to help with these other areas, to really give them some authority and responsibility. As art director, I came in to help with the vision for the game. We needed an art producer that was going to make that vision happen. Our outsourcing art director was going to assure the high quality results, but make it something that we could do in a very short period of time, and that everything was within the vision. And then we needed an art lead. This was somebody that was going to make our artists happy, make sure that the production was going well. And then we had a lead environmental artist. This is where the bridge between level design and art direction really comes together. And in a game like Borderlands, it's paramount that level design and art direction meet and just become really creative and drive their passions forward. And you'll see more of that as we get through here. So, how do you get consistency in your art with a small team? That's one of the things with the art style, is that the art style could allow for the sort of broad range of skill sets, and you couldn't necessarily tell. It was more about the whole scene, so per asset, maybe the assets would not be so, didn't require this sort of level of high poly modeling, this really long endeavor for every single asset. So we were able to sort of pull that back, use the assets that we had created over the years, and be able to do something with them. So we were able to just really play on people's strengths and find out where their weaknesses were and just kind of make sure that everybody was in the right place. So again, this is what I was talking about. We've got crazy vagina monsters, we've got massive extreme boss monsters, psycho bandits, extreme jump height. And it's the jump height that really kind of was that impetus for, wait a minute, we really just need something more crazy than this. And so we started to look back. So we started to look back at the game, looking back at where we wanted it to go, and find out where the levels were. So we're doing a lot of playing and really thinking about it. So we needed a purple cow. So for the game, if it's very brown, it's not very interesting. This guy, Seth Godin, wrote a book on marketing called The Purple Cow, Be Remarkable or Be Invisible. And frankly, that's where we felt like we were just being invisible. So his idea was that, if you're driving through France, you're seeing these beautiful cows, everything's amazing. After about an hour, they get boring. But if a purple cow was there, boy, that would be exciting. So that was kind of the idea, is that we needed to find our purple cow. So I went back and I really looked through all of our concept art. And if you look back at this with hindsight, you can start to see the sort of feel that we ended up getting with the actual assets. You can also see that some of these things, this sort of technology, this retro technology, it was a little crazy, right? It was a little over the top. And even in our concept art, you can kind of see this really, this sort of ink on top of texturing information. So the runner, that obviously made it all the way through. This is our loot chest. And this was an interesting one. As I was kind of going back through things, I was looking at this particular asset. I'm not even sure why somebody did this. I don't know why they were inking, maybe to tell a little bit of detail information for one of the artists. But it started to kind of click a few things together for me. I was thinking, well, that's an interesting way to think about our game. And we had looked at some different influences. We were looking at things like the Gorillas. We had looked at the Code Hunters video, which had a very similar style to this. And what they showed us in that video was that, oh, wow, you really can do sort of this line art, ink work, sort of CG, which was like, well, now, what if we were to do something like that in the game? And what if it started to really look like what we really like about our concept art? And that's where we kind of went from there. So I have, as the vice president of the company, as sort of chief creative officer, I have the ability to sort of push and pull the resources we need to do things. But you have to kind of be careful with that. With that kind of authority can cause problems. But I know that we need to do something with the game, but I'm not quite sure what. I've got this idea for this sort of look and feel, and that's why we hid in a closet and did a secret prototype. So do it the passive
way to handle your responsibility well.
Yeah, exactly.
We hid.
But we were worried because if we were to just suddenly go, hey, we're going to do this, well, this is very late in the project. Obviously, everybody's going to freak out. If we don't show an example, then we're going to be into some real problem, and we actually wouldn't be able to get any traction. No matter how well you describe it, You're not going to get anything.
You were trying to avoid a producer riot, perhaps.
Yes, exactly. This is the first asset that we did in the style. Just quickly taking one of the assets we had, just inking over it, kind of figuring out a little bit about the texturing capability, the styling underneath, and just, really kind of going through what we had. And thinking that through production we would do this. We would go through all of the assets and just do this to it, and the game would suddenly look better. And we did, this is Lilith. This is our first attempt on her. And later, as we sort of worked on her some more, Jen, the art director before me, she really took the effort to make the first female character in the game, I think, and from a female perspective, really treat her with sort of some dignity, if you will. She wasn't really over the top as far as her proportions and those kind of things. And the one on the left is just a quick rudimentary cell shading. Our style is actually a bit different. Even though we ink the outside, the trick is that the inside has to have this inking to go with it. The inking on the outside is going to help with depth and design elements and those kind of things. It's really important that we have both of those together. And most of our assets do. There's occasionally some assets that kind of slip through that don't, but that is one of the core elements of our rendering technology. So after the secret project, we needed to get buy-off. We needed to create interest. We were fueling passions and all those kind of things. What happened was as soon as people started to see it, wow, that's really cool. I want to do something. Let me get an asset. Let me do some of this. Next thing you know, we have a vignette. This vignette looks exactly like the original Firestone. And it didn't change much. Obviously, we changed some layout. We get, for gameplay, we added new elements. We added actually some color. But you can begin to see where the game was coming from. And this was actually a version of Mordecai, which I'll take you through Mordecai in a minute. But this was trying to do a realistic proportioned character in this particular inking style. And it really didn't work for us. He's kind of neat, but he's a bit, So Randy went, do you want to talk about that, Aaron?
Sure. So, and some of you may have read the game developer postmortem article that came out. We talked about this a little bit and talked about Firestone, which you just looked at. We knew that there was an inherent risk in what we were thinking and wanted to bring to 2K. We thought that we were really, really on to something. I'll tell you that internally, some of us began to learn about what was being pitched by Brian and the team that was working with him on the secret prototype. We were very, very nervous about the production ramifications here. Randy pretty much at the top of that list and was very skeptical. But we got together and we looked at it and we talked through the implications and we were really blown away and we really, really believed in this. Randy was completely on board and was eager to get out to the 2K office and talk with the team there to see what their reaction was. We were ready to be committed either way with what we had, but believing that what we had meant that we were going to have to redouble our efforts to make that good, or hopefully to get buy-in to this new idea and to get the buy-off and what all of it would mean within 2K. And as you know, once Randy showed it. The team there at 2K, they loved it, and from production to marketing to everyone that saw it, they were ready to be believers right there with us. But once they said, "Great, you've showed us something, we believe in it. Prove that you can do it." Well, then it was up to us to show that we could, and then some real thinking had to start about how we would pull that off, being that we were 3/4 of the way through the project.
Yep. So these were some of the reasons for why we did the change in the first place.
I was going to, just a quick story. It's sort of what's going on design side right now, like as, again, the shackles were broken. Some of you probably heard this story before, so I'm sorry, but I was talking to Jeremy Cook about skill trees, and because he was the one that actually went ahead and redesigned the entire skill tree basically on his own. If you look at games that have really successful skill trees, there's usually a lot of fantastical elements within them, and our game didn't have a lot of that going on. I mean, it's a game about 17 million guns, and he got really excited one day because he took the Roland character who had a sort of basic Halo-like skill tree, more power, more damage, and then he had one over on the right called Medic, and I was like, oh, that's cool, you can do some Medic stuff, and he shows me healing bullets. And I looked at him funny because, what? And he's like, well, okay, it's awesome. You take your gun and you shoot your teammate and they get healed. But then he kept explaining it. He's like, no, watch this. If I use a shotgun, I can give you bursts of health, and if I use a sniper rifle, I can go really far away and I can shoot you in the head and you get a lot of health. And I'm like, Jeremy, you're a god. It was fun. It was literally like, okay, realism is completely left at this point. Let's just make whatever's fun and not listen to anybody else. And we took that to E3 like right after that. And that was the story I kept telling to E3 because they'd look at me funny and, no, healing bullets, it's great. Like, it's the awesomest thing ever. And that's how we designed our skill tree. We took guns and gave them fantastical elements to get that RPG in the game. I thought that was really cool. So.
Yeah, very good. So this is Mordecai. I'm going to take you through the process of his evolution. This is the first concept art that we had for him, and then we built the model. And then we went back to the drawing board. And Massive Black did these, and they're great. And what's neat about it is that you can see the things that tied all the way through, right? This is the bird guy, he's got his sword all the way through. He's one of these, it's a weird, consistent character. Even though you'll see a lot of inconsistency in maybe the design ideas, there's just these few little bits that all the way through we kind of knew exactly what we wanted him to be. So we went ahead and, concepted that out, and we built him. And then we tried later with our inking style, and that didn't really work, so back to the drawing board. And in this particular case, we have Scott, who's one of our great concept artists, but he's really on the sort of cartoony side. And so it takes a little something to kind of get yourself wrapped around that, like, oh, okay, well, that's really extreme. Yeah, we're getting extreme with the game, but maybe that's a little too far.
Yeah, it's a 6-inch waist.
Yeah, 6-inch waist on that, yeah. See that? Yeah. So this is where we kind of took him a little bit to kind of balance him out a little bit. And then when Adam, our sort of lead character artist, when he started to model this, now he's been going down this path of, I'm going to be doing the most, realistic characters. That's his sort of life path as a modeler. And we're asking him suddenly to do these fantastical characters, and he's looking at this concept art and just like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do here. That's really over the top. But what was interesting was between the two of them, because you've got this extreme, sort of comic book look, and you've got this person who's really grounded in reality, is you end up with this place that's really nice and in between. And that was the balance that we found with all our characters. He's still extreme, but not as extreme. Low poly model. This is one of the first passes. There was something about 2K didn't really like, I guess, orange-haired people, and we ended up having to kind of...
There's actually a sign that says no gingers on the front of 2K.
I don't know what that's about.
Chow's looking at me like, shut up, dude.
But this is where he ended up. And this was sort of the early concept art for a number of our other characters. Roland here on the left, and originally that was going to be a Lilith. And then this is obviously where we ended up. So I'll show you a few of the techniques that we went through for our style. They're pretty simple, really. I mean, they're the typical things that you have in some sort of loose concept art styles, right? Your ink brush and your painting and your dirt brush and all those kind of things. But you can see the progression through this particular asset. And this was where we wanted to start working with the material. How do we deal with this particular texturing style, this particular line art, but we want to determine different materials. Basic sort of cardboard box with some tape on it. You've got to have some tape on it. And then you've got your metal box and then sort of the rock concrete slab. And all those looks needed to be figured out. The one thing that we found out about having the depth in these particular shapes is that we needed to have some hatching to sort of like create the shadowing. And then when you didn't have that, it didn't really work as well. So this is a sample direction for the arena sign that we had in the early portion of Arid. And I'll just quickly take you through the sort of the base color pass, the sort of dirt that we add, the highlights, and then this is the sort of inking and final color. This is the way the model works. And then another example I'll take you through quickly is Claptrap. I think we're all pretty familiar with him at this point. This was one of our concept artists, Lauren. he had this in a different task. We used Jira, and he had this in there just sort of as a joke. And as we were going through it, I was like, wow, I remember looking at this little robot you had. What do you think about maybe putting him in the game? And this is the original concept for him. And then we kind of took him somewhere else, and Lauren did some more passes on him. Kind of weird. And we're starting to get to where he is now. And this is one of the final concepts. And we went ahead and built him. And then the texturing wasn't quite working. We needed something that was going to get him to pop out a little bit more and start having some character. And then, of course, he needs sort of a racing stripe to really finish him off. Ta-da! So, and lastly, I'll show you the content, this example of the rocks. This is, again, Lauren, who we wanted to try some traditional media and try to see how that would work in the game besides just doing it via Photoshop. And I think we can kind of see we needed him to kind of do it as a tiling texture. And you can really see this, basically throughout the world. Just a few examples of that. I think effects were a big part of the look and feel of where Borderlands was, especially when Mikey's talking about the skill tree. It was, huge. And again, meeting the style, the stuff was just way over the top, and it was.
Can you stay on the screenshot for a second?
Do what?
I was just stay on this one for a second. One of the things that was really, really interesting for us going into the art style change was when we revealed it first in the screenshots and stuff. It was a little bit more mixed than it was when it came out, reaction-wise. Some people were like, "Oh, I don't want to play the game. It's so unrealistic, whatever." But when they start playing it, I think it's one of those things you forget about the black lines. You kind of forget about it. It just becomes a world, and what you don't necessarily see. And we saw this across the board on the Truth Team testing was that our elements are so separated out, like the foreground elements. Midground, background, and all. I mean, in a game with loot just literally explodes out of every orifice of everything that happens. You never get confused by what you're looking at and what you're fighting. Everything is so well defined, and that was sort of like a really nice side effect of the art style change. Is that okay? Now our world, much like a game that Blizzard would build, is very well defined and separated, and that actually just makes the game better. That's one of my favorite effects on Lilith. So these are a few of our key tech changes that we ended up creating to support this sort of art style. Obviously, as Mikey was just saying, using the outlines, we really needed to do something to really pop the foreground and background elements out. Even though our world is a little brighter, there's still a lot of brown in it. It's still this sort of arid backwater place. And so if we're going to be in this sort of grimy, dirty area, then we need to do something to make that feel right. So these are just a few examples of that. We saw this shot before, but you can really see the black lines there, and let's see what we're doing there. And this was the beginning of using our lighting technique. And an interesting thing about our lighting was to keep it fast. We ended up creating one light source up in the sky, which created a fiction. Out of that, we created a fiction for this star, this moon that's up there, that is sort of reflecting the light down on the planet. It's always in the same location. It was an interesting way of always keeping actually really exciting shadows in our world, right? Whenever we had the shadows, they were always these sort of like semi-long shadows, so they were exciting, right? And they added the kinds of depth that you want into the world. I mean, even from the very beginning of the art change, real-time lighting, which for those of you that use Unreal 3, you might kind of raise your eyebrow a little bit. We definitely wanted to have a real-time lighting solution in there so the world would feel alive at all times. Windmills are moving and rockets are flying around, and everything in the world actually does cast a real-time shadow, which was quite the undertaking.
Right. And then we borrowed some tools or some effects and things like that from and technology from some of our other projects. That's one of the nice things about obviously being an Unreal House is that other projects may be solving a problem that we're not solving, and we have a central team that helps to bring all of these things together. within our technologies. And lastly, the light function made it so that our nighttime we could have real-time lighting, or seemingly real-time lighting. The only thing it doesn't really do is it doesn't give you the normal map information, but it runs really fast, and it lets us get that kind of high contrast stuff that we need for our vehicles and light situations. So how did we pull it off? Earlier I mentioned we reorganized the art team. Do you want to talk a little bit about the design team, Mikey? How we sort of reorganized those guys? And
yeah, I mean, what happened was we continued throwing new eyes on the project, and this is true for all of them, is we had the original artists, the original designers, and then when Brian came on as art director, he brought some artists with him as fresh eyes, and then when I came on with a lot of the designers from another project, we were playing merry-go-round, we brought fresh eyes on the design and sort of the style of the in-betweens. Like one of my big contributions with the design guys was the introduction with the bus and all that kind of stuff, the boss intros, and taking the art style and giving it some kind of cinematic glue.
And attitude.
I hate that word. It doesn't mean anything. You can have a good one, you can have a bad one. What is attitude?
Well,
give it attitude.
It's like saying stylistic, I'm sure.
Give it something.
I want to mention something. I want to mention something about the merry-go-round point here, which the way that we mean this, and we talk about it as part of our culture internally, is that sometimes it almost doesn't matter what the idea is as long as everybody is pushing in the same direction. Up to the point where we started making changes on the projects, there were these big, religious disputes over things like, what is it first, an RPG or a shooter? And those would stem off into...
Shooter one, by the way.
Yeah, it would stem off... Well, that's our background, and we decided we would do what we were good at. And then finding out how to make the RPG elements work in the shooter world was something that we did, I think, differently. But it's really about getting everybody going in the same direction. Once we started getting everybody behind the idea with the art style change and other changes that we were making, everybody was able to push in the same direction. We didn't have the sort of tension that we'd had in a project before that.
The accidental reverse motivation, what that means is there was a situation where one of our artists was, he was learning this sort of how we wanted this stuff to look, and he was trying to use a lot of Photoshop filters and doing things that were sort of, just cheats, really. Because he saw the daunting task. We've got all these assets. How are we going to do this really fast? But what he wasn't doing was pushing up his sleeves and really getting in there. And he's a really talented artist. And so we had been using some outsourcing companies, and they had been doing a really good job of sort of grokking the style and doing some things. And I was just talking in the hall with him, and I'm like, man, you got to see this stuff. They're just kicking our ass. They're just doing some amazing stuff. It was great. And boy, did he go and he became our best artist in the style. It was amazing. He just, really went back to his skills that he had as a comic book artist and inker, and he was our best texture artist.
He was going to show them.
Yeah. You want to talk about the other point there, Aaron?
Yeah. Well, this is another part of our culture. We have a very flat structure as a studio. And anyone with a good idea should feel free and does feel free to come forward and talk to other people about it to see where the consensus might be, because we really want the best decision to win. And a lot of times you have someone who is responsible for implementing something. Well, they're going to be closest to whatever the problem is that needs a solution, whatever the thing is that needs to get made. As long as you have a customer and the person doing the implementation paired up, you're going to have something that achieves. You're going to have a solution that achieves. That's a good outcome for the problem, and you're going to have somebody as long as the person who's doing implementation is involved in coming up with the design for the implementation. You can't do better for having someone invested in their work. It's much different than just handing off a spec to someone to go do and then, having a checklist to see if they did it when they're all done. So a lot of times, if somebody has a good idea, they will go ahead and prototype something and do it and come back and show us. And usually, because they're very passionate about it and they understand what the problem was, the creative solution they come up with is a lot of times the best one. And so this is part of the way we think and work. If somebody does something and we trust them to come up with a solution, it's usually a really awesome solution.
And just to let you in, that's how you build a game in a year. I mean, if the people on the ground love what they're doing and want to do it, they're just going to work faster, and no amount of time or money is going to change that a lot of times. So there's a lot of stuff that no one came up with at the top level. They'd say, I want to do some crazy quest. Like, there's a lot of really ridiculous quests, including one ridiculous ending, and I will not take any questions on the ending of Borderlands during this. But that was a joke. I totally lost my train of thought because I just got really mad. I'm sorry.
He who makes it wins.
Who makes it wins?
Yeah.
Let's just run through a few examples. Saw that before.
Profit!
Success. Yeah, that's pretty true.
Oh, for sure. I mean, the artists from other projects were coming out of the woodwork. Like, I hadn't done a texture in 4 years, and I still wanted to do a texture in that game. It was awesome.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons why our DLCs are so varied and interesting, is because, this idea of he who makes it wins, in a way, is part of, and part of the sort of style and attitude of the game is that it allows for things like the zombies, and it allows for things like Moxie and mechs and bots and Nox. So.
And explore what our game really was. I don't know if you guys played the DLC, but I think you actually learn more about Pandora and the story of Pandora in Nox than you did in the entire game. And that was us, after having made this game so fast, really getting some freedom and some breath to just experiment with what we have and try different things and give you guys a level cap raise and really just go nuts with what Borderlands is. And that's what everyone at Gearbox is really excited about is what's the future? What's that question mark right there, Could be smart.
That was Aaron's, by the way. So
It's rare when you get to the end of the project and everybody who is on it wants to keep working on it and wants to continue pushing forward the vision and production for that project. And that was the case here. The whole team, when the game landed, we went through a lot making it. But by the time we got to the end, everybody was playing it. Everybody was excited about it. Everybody wanted to know, what could they participate as the project, after the project landed. They knew that we were going to start making DLC. Everybody had ideas. Everybody wanted to participate.
I just stood in the back of the room going, zombie, 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 zombie. That was just over and over.
So it's a rare and special thing, and we were all really excited to be a part of that. And it's also a scary thing. You very well may be in an organization where ideas aren't able to bubble up in the same way. I hope everybody here is able to have a voice in the projects where a good idea can win. But the truth is that there are very real production ramifications to things like what we did. We happen to have a great partner. We had great people in the company. We were able to be creative and industrious to get it done. But it took a lot of effort, and it took flexibility. And in order to be adaptive like that and have a team that can adapt, it speaks a lot, I think, to the people that we have working at Gearbox. But you very well may have similar people who, if they are challenged to come up with great ideas to difficult problems that they're facing, could come up with things maybe perhaps as dramatic as what we did, but certainly other problems that will make your games fantastic.
Hey, Brian, just on the management side, what was that Capnell quote from Randy yesterday about risk and management? Sorry, it's definitely like in Borderlands in a nutshell.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah, putting you on the spot like
I
that.
have no idea what he said. Yeah, I forgot. Thanks.
Essentially, boiled down, the idea is it's not management's job to say no, don't take a risk. It's management's job to make sure that when your team does, that you're okay if you fail coming out of it. That's their job. So Brian, in the managerial position, although he hid in a closet, that was a loaded statement. He did help us mitigate the risks and push us to be creative and try stuff. And I think it's no secret that this is the best game Gearbox has ever made because we pushed ourselves to be better and try crazy stuff as opposed to stay in the brown period. And I don't think we'd be up here speaking right now had we done that and we had just sort of an okay game that didn't do anything new and didn't give us any freedom. Because that freedom gets passed along to you guys, and I love hearing stories about Borderlands.
I think we have maybe 5 minutes.
No,
questions.
we got like 13 or 14 actually. I was really watching it.
So that's it.
So questions.
Any questions? Feel free to ask.
There's actually a microphone right there, so if you guys want to go stand in line on the microphone, that would be the easiest way to do this. Sorry.
Wait. You already saw. I'll reiterate. What was the question? What made us switch from the Half-Life engine to the Unreal engine?
From what? Oh, like back in the day? The last thing we did with the Half-Life engine was Nightfire, and we all know how well that did. So, I don't know, like Unreal, like no lie, is the best tool set right now out there. I love, like, from Matinee to Kismet to everything, it really is the full package. And
I'll mention about that we see ourselves as an entertainment company, not a technology company. So,
okay. And actual questions, yeah.
First, I want to say thank you for making this game, and thank you for making it this way. This is a game that I've spent a lot of hours playing with my wife, and she wouldn't have played it with the old art style. That makes a huge difference.
That's awesome.
Even though mechanically it's a very similar game. Which actually, this is going to sound like a naive question, so forgive me for it. But along that same line, I wonder if there are people in a household that have very different styles of what they like in a game, if they can be brought together by having a game that can support multiple themes simultaneously for different people.
I have a pretty solid example of this. My sister and her husband, my sister's favorite games up to this point were Fallout 3 and Oblivion, and my brother-in-law's favorite games were Halo and Call of Duty, and they asked me if they would enjoy playing this together. And I was just like, probably yes, and they had a blast. It does kind of draw from different places, and they never played a co-op game before, so this is their first thing. So it was kind of a religious experience for them. But it definitely can draw separate play styles together because everybody likes playing together. It's fun.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Question.
Yeah, hi. I'm from the Tony Hawk team, and actually, it's probably your game that I see on TVs probably more than ours because everyone's constantly trying to figure out your
Thank you.
style.
We love Tony Hawk.
Yeah. So the question really is, I know you're not really a tech team, more of an entertainment team, like you were saying. But how much interaction with Epic do you have on specifics regarding lighting, or is everything in the box? Do you have to go outside the box for any of your tech?
Is a question about our interactions with Epic?
The question is actually about lighting. If you guys actually were doing anything sort of out of the box, I saw the shadow stuff a little bit, but was it pretty much in-hand tools, or?
We had to craft that ourselves. Obviously, Unreal gives us a great foundation, but when we're doing something like this and we need it to, meet our needs, then we're gonna do something to make it the way we need it to be made.
Right. Were you able to do some optimization with vertex colors or anything to kind of try and limit the load or light maps, or how is that all managed?
I can't exactly answer all of the technical issues for that, but what I can say is that if you want to give us your card, we can hook you up with some of the guys that can talk about that. But we really went through a lot of things to fix the lighting.
Actually, just for you, go find James Golding at the Epic booth. I literally just had this conversation with him about lighting and what they're doing and what we were doing. Like, go find that guy.
Yeah.
He's like the smartest dude I've ever met, but he can answer your question.
Absolutely.
I think we can take maybe one more question. It's almost 2:30. So.
Oh.
Well, I'll make it quick here. I thought you guys got a lot of great mileage out of your enemies, too. I thought you did a good job of taking kind of a basic creature class and through scale and color and different textures, you were able to make it feel like you were getting ganged up by a lot of different creatures, even though it was essentially the same model. Was that something that also kind of came in at the 11th hour? Were you playing around that sort of stuff, or was that always kind of in there?
Definitely a happy accident. We had a designer named Ruben whose full-time job was AI stuff, but it was also, as used earlier, the kit bashing. He would create a new AI type and kit bash on top of it, and our system was so open, because it's all data-driven, that when you throw a genius like Ruben at a problem, he can make stuff happen that you wouldn't expect. In General Knox, we walked in one day, and there were guys with jetpacks, and none of us knew how. We're like, how did you do that? Because the system is crazy enough you can do that, and he would, with minimal help from coders, just generate these enemy types constantly. And yeah, without Ruben, I don't think the game would have been the same.
We'll be happy to answer more questions, but we should probably release the podium here. So, thank you.
Thank you. You're awesome.